The story of Balaam is one of the Bible's most intriguing accounts and reveals much about the spiritual and moral challenges that can lead even those who know God's power astray. He was a prophet who recognized the authority of the Lord, yet, driven by greed and the desire to please men, he was tempted to go against God's chosen people, Israel. This account is more than a story of a prophet and a king. It is a powerful lesson on the importance of remaining faithful to God and His instructions, even in the face of temptations and pressures. At the time when the people of Israel were wandering in the desert on their way to the Promised Land, their victories over powerful nations began to inspire fear among the surrounding cities and kingdoms. One of these kingdoms was Moab, ruled by Balak, a king who feared Israel's growth and strength. Balak knew that Israel marched under the Lord's protection, and that no one could defeat them in battle while the Lord was with them. Anxious and unsure of how to stop Israel's advance, Balak came up with an idea. He would seek spiritual help to curse and weaken them. Balak sent messengers to Balaam, a prophet who lived in a distant land. Balaam's reputation was that of someone whose blessings and curses were effective. The king hoped that by offering a generous reward, he could convince Balaam to curse Israel, breaking the divine protection surrounding them. The messengers brought gifts and the promise of great honor, believing this would be enough to sway Balaam. When the messengers reached Balaam and presented Balak's request, Balaam initially showed reverence for the Lord. He asked the envoys to wait while he consulted the Lord to determine whether he should go with them. Knowing the intentions of both Balak and Balaam, the Lord clearly instructed him not to go and reminded him that Israel was a blessed people. Obeying God's instruction, Balaam informed the messengers he could not accompany them and sent them back to the king with his refusal. However, Balak did not give up. Determined to gain Balaam's help, he sent even more noble messengers with even greater promises of reward. This time, Balaam, enticed by the prospect of wealth and honor, asked the messengers to stay again, saying he would consult the Lord once more. God allowed him to go, but only on the condition that he would speak only what the Lord commanded. The next day, Balaam set off with the messengers. However, along the way, the Lord sent an angel to block his path, knowing that Balaam was being drawn by greed and had impure intentions. Balaam couldn't see the angel blocking the road, but his donkey could. The donkey veered off the path 3 times to avoid the angel, and, frustrated, Balaam beat her. It was then that the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and she spoke to Balaam, questioning why he was beating her. Only after this miraculous dialogue did the Lord open Balaam's eyes to see the angel before him, who rebuked him for his behavior. The vision of the angel served as a direct warning to Balaam. The prophet realized how much he was being led by greed and understood that he could only speak what the Lord commanded. When he arrived in Moab, Balak eagerly received him and led him to high places where Balaam could see part of the Israelite camp. The king hoped that from there, Balaam would be able to curse the people. Balak offered sacrifices and led Balaam to strategic locations, believing that at some point he would obtain the curse he desired on Israel. Yet each time Balaam opened his mouth, the Lord placed a blessing on his lips instead of a curse. 3 times Balak insisted, and 3 times Balaam pronounced blessings over Israel, proclaiming their strength, prosperity, and divine protection. These blessings were so powerful and emphatic that Balak was enraged, having expected the opposite. Frustrated and furious, Balak confronted Balaam and dismissed him, saying he had failed. Balaam, however, reaffirmed that he could only speak what the Lord commanded him. Yet, despite all this, Balaam was still torn between his desire to please God and his wish to receive the reward Balak had promised. This inner conflict led him to a subtle yet devastating plan. Balaam realized that if he could not curse Israel directly, he could advise Balak to lead the people into sin against God, which might result in their own downfall. Balaam instructed Balak to entice the men of Israel to engage with Moabite women, participating in their feasts and idol worship. This strategy aimed to distance the people of God from his commandments, leading them into idolatry and immorality. Knowing that faithfulness to God was the source of their strength, Balaam sought to weaken Israel through a spiritual trap. Balaam's plan had a devastating effect. Many of Israel's men fell into sin, worshipping the idols of Moab and uniting with pagan women. The Lord's anger burned against Israel for their unfaithfulness, and a plague spread through the camp, killing thousands. Only after decisive action to purify the people was the plague stopped and peace restored. Balaam's story is a powerful warning about the dangers of greed and the desire to please men at the expense of pleasing God. Balaam knew the power and authority of the Lord, yet his ambition led him down a path of corruption and betrayal. He tried to manipulate God's will for personal gain, resulting in his own ruin. Rather than remaining faithful to God and using his prophetic gift to bless and exhort, he yielded to the temptation of using his influence for selfish purposes. We learn from Balaam that knowing God or possessing spiritual gifts is not enough. A pure heart and a genuine commitment to obey God, regardless of the temptations around us, are essential. Balaam's story challenges us to examine our own motivations and to seek a true commitment to the Lord. We cannot serve God while also pursuing selfish interests, for such duplicity leads to destruction. Balaam paid a high price for his error. He was later killed alongside Israel's enemies as a consequence of his betrayal. His story testifies to the Lord's justice and that he is not deceived by double intentions or divided hearts. Despite briefly falling into Balaam's trap, God's people were restored and continued forward, remembering the importance of remaining faithful to the Lord. This narrative of Balaam, his errors, and their consequences serves as a call for us to exercise self-control, discernment, and unwavering faith. We must not let the desire for wealth, honor, or human approval compromise our faithfulness to God. Each of us is called to walk with integrity, resist temptation, and place God's will above all. May we learn from Balaam's story and Israel's journey. May we remain vigilant against temptations that seek to lead us astray and keep our hearts centered on God. He is our strength, our protector, and our guide. And just as he preserved Israel, he will guard us if we remain faithful to him.